Welcome to Woman at the Well. My name is Trisha Claire Williams, and I'm so excited to be sitting at the feet of Jesus with you today. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the second part of my testimony. So if you didn't watch the first part, go back and listen to that one. I discussed from childhood all the way up to when I started college, which is where we're going to pick up today. Just so you're aware, the working definition of a testimony is a solemn declaration, witness, or evidence of God's truth, actions, and character affirming the gospel. So that's exactly what my testimony is. It's evidence of who God is in my life and what he's done for me. And so we'll pick back up where we left off with me starting college. So I just graduated from high school, and my mom and I toured several schools. I knew that I wanted to go to a Christian university because I wanted to get a Christian degree. It didn't make sense to me to get a Christian degree from just like a secular, normal college. I just didn't think that I would be getting the most out of it that way. And so I only toured Christian schools and just prayed the Lord make it very evident where I was supposed to go. So I grew up going to this thing called Fuge Camps. It's a Christian camp. It's 1 week out of the summer. We usually went like end of June, and we usually went to this particular Christian university. And so I kind of come to associate this particular school with that camp that I went to, and I loved Fuge Camps. I loved them. It was my favorite week out of the whole year because I just got to meet so many other fellow believers in different walks of life, and it was just a whole week of like sitting in classrooms and learning about Jesus. And that's what I love to do, is like learn about the Bible and who God is. And so I loved doing that. And I mean, it wasn't just sitting in a classroom, but even though that was my favorite part, it was also like playing recreational games and clubs. And we had like morning celebration, which was like a worship in the morning. And it just was such a fun, sweet time. And I went every single year from 7th grade to 12th grade. And then as a senior in high school, I actually got to help lead one. It was like a high school program where juniors and seniors could apply to almost be like interns for staffers, is what they called them, people that were working the camp. And so you would basically intern with a staffer for 2 weeks. You would learn for the first week and then kind of help run it the second week. And I knew that I wanted to do that because I loved that camp so much, and I wanted to eventually become a staffer myself. And so I actually ended up interning at the college that I was going to attend. So it just kind of worked out that way, that the school that I ended up loving the most was also the school that I became like a staffer, intern, person in training, and grew up going to as well. So there was tons of colleges that hosted these camps, and it just happened to be that I continually got placed at this college over and over and over again. And so when we toured the college itself, I just felt already so at home there and so at peace there. And my mom and I are super, super close. I'm basically like her mini me. Everything that I am, I kind of reflect her. And so she has great spiritual discernment as well. She's really good at like listening to what the Lord has to say, and then applying and integrating that into her life and her workplace. And so I know whenever we hear the Lord the same, it's like double confirmation. And so I remember distinctly feeling walking on that campus, and when you tour colleges, they do like campus tours and you meet all the different people and professors or whatever. And I remember walking on campus and just taking it all in and just feeling like the presence and peace of God just like sit on me. And I hadn't experienced that at any other school, of just like home, like this is it. And I turned to look at my mom and tell her what I'm feeling. And before I can even open my mouth, she goes, "Is it just me, or do I just feel so at peace here?" I was like, "Well, thank you for confirming what I was feeling, Mom, because I was just about to tell you that's what I was feeling too." And so that's how we picked my school, was we just felt like the presence of God was there, and so that's where I wanted to be. So that's where I went. We moved in to my dorm room, and on my very first day of class, I was so excited to be there. I mean, I loved the little Christian high school that I just come from, and I was so pumped for a Christian college. I can only imagine what the Lord was going to do. And so I remember sitting in my little desk in college at the very front row because I couldn't wait. I was so excited, and I got out my notebook and all my different colored pens, so ready to go. And I turned around to introduce myself to the person behind me, and there sat some random guy. And I was like, hey, my name is Trisha Claire. I'm so excited. Is this your first class? And it was also his first class of college ever. We were both freshmen. And he was like, yeah. I was like, awesome. I think we're going to be fast friends. Just way too excited. And he kind of looked at me like I was a little crazy, but he was like, okay. And sure enough, we were fast friends. And I don't know if that's because I was just that excited or we just both were really excited to make friends in general. I mean, it was your first week of college. You really don't know anybody. And so anyone that's going to interact with you and wants to be your friend, you're going to be like, yes, please, I'll take a friend because I don't know anybody. And so we did. We became very fast friends. And little did I know that he was going to be the best man in my wedding. Had no clue that my future husband and this guy were going to end up being great friends, best friends, and he was going to be the best man in my wedding, and he was going to be instrumental in both of our lives. To me, he was just this guy that I wanted to be friends with. So I went through my whole freshman year, and at the start of your freshman year, if you have Greek life on your campus, you go through recruitment. So recruitment is where you meet all the different sororities or fraternities if you're a guy. It's kind of almost like an interview process. You like meet them, they meet you, and you kind of decide where your best fit would be, and they decide if you would be a good fit for their house based off of all like the values and qualities and what their sorority or fraternity represents. And so I went through recruitment not at all thinking I was gonna like join a sorority. To be so honest, I had seen the movies and I'm not a party girl. You know this from the past testimony video, but also just I'm sure you can tell that I'm not a party girl. I've never drank alcohol a day in my life. I've never done the drugs. I don't party. I'm very social. I love to social gathering. I just don't party. And so I assumed that Greek life and sororities was all just like party. And I was so wrong. That was not at all what my sorority experience was like, especially because I was at a Christian school. Now, I'm sure at some state schools I can't speak to those, but in my experience, that's not at all what it was like. If anything, this was the most godly group of women that I'd ever been a part of. I went through the experience to make friends, and that's exactly what I did. And so I remember walking into what would be my future sorority house, and once again feeling that like peace from the Lord. Everyone I talked to somehow, some way, without me doing it, integrated Jesus into the conversation, and that was what I was looking for. I want Jesus to be at the center of everything that I do, even if it's as simple as a sorority. I wanted him to be at the very center of my experience in this world. We would have to wait in between each house because we would go to a house and then wait outside and then go into the next one. And everyone else in the line would be chatting amongst themselves and making sure their hair and makeup looked good. And I walked the parking lot lines. If you can't tell, I'm a little quirky because I'm walking these parking lot lines and just praying. I'm praying over these houses. I'm praying over their philanthropies. I'm praying over their leadership. I'm praying over the girls that were going through recruitment and their nerves, and that the Lord make it evident to them where they're supposed to be. And I was just praying over my experience, and the Lord would speak to me and show me what he wanted me to do. I was just very fervent in my prayer over this experience, and I really think it's because I knew that to join a sisterhood like that and join an association like that could be a very spiritual experience. I was going to spend a ton of time in this house with these girls, be associated with them, and I wanted it to be something that glorified God. And so that's what I did. I think it was like the final night of recruitment, and that's when you're supposed to tell the house that you want, like, you're my top choice. My person didn't really tell me that. She said it very like casual. She's like, if you wanted to like let them know, like that would be helpful. And she meant it as like a gentle, like a gentle nudge. There's nothing gentle nudge about me. I'm gonna tell you straight up. And so I went to this house and we were talking to this particular girl that I talked to a couple times, and I just looked at her and I was like, yeah, like God told me that I was gonna join the sorority, and so I'll see you tomorrow on bid day. The other girls are like, I really love it here. I feel so at home here. I'm straight up saying, see you tomorrow. I will be one of you tomorrow. God told me, so I will be here. I mean, how are you going to argue with that, I guess? And God was right. I was right. And I joined that sorority. And in hindsight, I had no idea how hard it actually was to join a sorority, like all the things that go into that process and experience that I learned later on. But yeah, the Lord really provided in that. He told me where I was going to go, and he opened the door, and I walked straight through. And it really was such an incredible experience being a part of this sorority, because I met such God-fearing women through it, and I had such a great opportunity to lead biblical conversations and invest in people one-on-one. It brought me some of my greatest friends, and for that I'm forever grateful and honored to have been such a beautiful legacy of women. So I went through my whole freshman year getting acquainted with classes and making friends and roommates and sorority life, and I loved it. I was so content and so at peace with what the Lord was doing in my life. And I had felt myself growing so much, not only as like a Christian, but as like a woman. You know, as you go to college, you grow up, you know, and I was already pretty grown up, but it was different to be independent and on my own. And I still talked to my parents all the time while I was in college, and came home every now and again, and for my brother's birthdays and events and stuff like that. But I just really grew up a lot, and I was so thankful for that. And then March of that year came around, and it was March of 2020 when I was a freshman in college. And as you may know, 2020 was quite the year. And we were told by our college administration that we were going to go on an early spring break, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. The spring break's going to be 2 weeks instead of one, because there was this virus going around and they didn't want it to spread, and other big colleges were sending people home, and so they kind of followed suit. And so we packed up to leave, and I remember talking to my dad on the phone, and I was like, yeah, I'm just going to pack enough clothes for 2 weeks, and I don't know, we'll come back. And he was like, I might want to pack a little bit more than that. And I said, Dad, are you sure? It's just, they said 2 weeks. It'll probably just be 2 weeks. He was like, anything that you want at home for the foreseeable future, I would go ahead and pack it. I was like, okay. All right, Dad. And so I did. I packed a little extra, and having no clue that I was not coming back to my dorm room that semester. No clue that my freshman year was going to be cut so short. And we were sent home for COVID, for the coronavirus. And we were home the rest of the semester, and we had to finish all of our classes completely online. It was a crazy experience to have your freshman year cut so short. Like, you're just now getting into the groove of college and making friends, and then you're just abruptly stopping. And so we went home, and I was supposed to work at Fuge, that summer camp that I loved so much, and it got canceled for the whole summer. And so I didn't get to. I was home all summer long with my family. And in case I haven't already said so, my family comprises of my parents and an older sister and 2 little brothers. My older sister is technically my half sister, but she is everything to me. She is like my ride or die, my person. We've never fought a day in our lives. She's 6 years older than me and my biggest role model. I love her so dearly. So she never lived full time with us, but I saw her often growing up. So there was never time for arguments when you missed each other that much. And so it's weird because I'm like the oldest, kind of. Like, I was the oldest in the home, but whenever she came home, I wasn't. And so I had like this oldest sibling mentality and like vibe about me, but I'm not technically the oldest. And then my brother is the one that had the Lyme's disease that the Lord rescued and redeemed. And then I have another little brother who is 11 years younger than me, and he's adopted. And such a joy, such a light. I'll tell his adoption story another time, but he is the best kid. And the Lord truly placed him in our family. And so it was just all of us hanging out during COVID until the fall semester rolled around, and they allowed everyone to come back for my sophomore year, but everyone had to wear masks to school. And so you had to like have a mask on in class and everything. And I was with these roommates that, I mean, I'd only been in college for like a couple of months before we got sent home. And so I knew them, but not fairly well. And it kind of bit me in the butt. It was not a good roommate experience at all. It just blew up, and I had to get out of there. I was like, these people are so, for lack of better words, dramatic and kind of catty. And I am neither of those things. And it just did not work out for me to be there. It did not feel like a safe place for me. I could not imagine living a whole year in that dorm. And so I went to the advising council and was like, you got to get me out of here. I can't be here. And so they switched me to a different room with two girls that I'd never met before a day in my life. They were both transfer students. And I remember calling that same guy friend that I met on the very first day of classes and being like, help me, you've got to help me move out of here. I need help. And I didn't give him any context, really. I was just like, hey, I'm moving dorms this Saturday. My parents are coming up. Is there any way that you could spare an afternoon? And he's a great friend. And he said, for sure, I'll be there. He brought like several guys I'd ever met before in my life. He had a trailer. They moved all my stuff out in an afternoon. It was so impressive. And so I moved in with these two girls. They were fantastic. They were so fun. I ended up living with one of them again my junior year. And it was so much easier. It was so great. And I'm so thankful that I moved when I did, because I was about to have a very transformative year. And I don't think it would have been as fun as it was if I was still in that previous roommate situation. So here's where the story gets good. So if you weren't tuned in, tune in, ladies and gents, because this is the story of how I met my husband. As you may remember from part 1 of my testimony story, a common theme in my life is hearing the voice of the Lord, and the promise I made him that if he spoke clearly and evidently to me, that I would be obedient the first time. And so I had lots of experiences with hearing the voice of the Lord and fulfilling that promise of saying, yes, Lord, and being obedient the first time. Primarily with my little brother and the Lord rescuing him from himself and from the disease that plagued his mind. And then also in like random other scenarios of like interacting with people and walking up to strangers and telling them about God, and or just starting conversations or saying specific things at specific times. Like the Lord just had been very sweet and kind to me and used me as a vessel because I was so willing and excited to be one. And I'd only ever seen the Lord bless those situations. And so on this random February day, I was getting dressed to go see a girlfriend of mine. We were going to go study for a mutual class that we were in. And I pulled on like a sweatpants and like a sweatshirt. Like it wasn't anything cute. And I was like putting on my shoes about to walk out the door. And I heard God be like, don't wear that. And God and I, like usually like when I hear the voice of the Lord, like it's very important, like telling me where my brother is or like go have like a gospel conversation with this person. It's never really about my fashion choices. But I know what God sounds like. Like I have lots of practice hearing the voice of the Lord and registering that that's like the shepherd and I am the sheep and I know what my shepherd sounds like. And so I knew that it was God telling me not to wear what I was wearing. But I definitely hesitated for a second. I was like, since when do we talk about my fashion choices, God? But I mean, I made a promise I was going to be obedient the first time. And so I changed clothes. I changed clothes into a cuter outfit. And at the time I just thought like, maybe the Lord's looking out for the gram because I took a cute picture that day with that same friend. And maybe he just wanted me to be cute for this picture. I didn't know. I had no idea what was about to happen to me. But I was walking on the sidewalk going to dinner, the dining hall at our college, and I see this guy get out of his car. And when I tell you I had like instant fight or flight, like I panicked. I've been single for almost 2 years at this point. I was not looking for a boyfriend. I was perfectly content in my singleness, loving what the Lord was doing in and around me. Truly was totally fine by myself. And then this guy got out of his car and like I just knew that's why God told me to change clothes. And I was like, God, what are you doing to me, dude? Like, I'm good. I didn't ask for this. And he was like, I almost felt like I was like, could you chill for like 2 seconds? Could you like trust for like 2 seconds? And I was like, I want to, but I'm freaking out right now. And I didn't know why I cared so deeply, but like I felt frozen to the ground. And I looked over to the girl that I was with and she starts waving him down. I'm like, great. She's in on it. She knows this guy somehow. And he's walking towards us at this point. And I'm doing like a head to toe assessment of like, why am I freaking out so bad about this random guy? And I'm like, okay, he's in like a golf shirt. It's like a cute golf shirt. Looks like he's a golfer and he has messy, cute brown hair and glasses. And as he's getting closer, I'm like, oh, and blue eyes. Wow, that's really stunning blue eyes. Why do I care? And so I'm like really trying to figure out who this guy is. And the only thing I can think of is like, well, he's cute, but like, why do I care? And he gets to us and he looks at me and he goes, hi, I'm Clayton. And I hear the voice of the Lord as loudly and clearly and boldly as I'd ever heard it in my entire life. And God said to me, there he is. And that's how I met my husband. And that story, truly, if like you didn't believe in God or have a faith as big as mine, where like you believe that God can do that in your life, you'd be like, no. There's no way that happened to you. That's like a rom-com, Trisha Clare. That is not real life. But it was my real life that legitimately happened to me. And so all I knew at that time was this cute guy, his name is Clayton, and he's my husband. And that's all that I know. And so I think I said something really smooth, kind of like, hi. I don't know. And the girl I was with mercifully said, we're going to go grab dinner. Want to come? And he said, sure. You know, in college, you could just kind of like hang out with anyone, eat with anybody. Like you just make a friend, fast friend, and it's whatever. So we all go to the dining hall and we sit on this really long table of just humans, just tons of people. And we sat together and it's like no one else in the world existed. Truly, like we were there for like over an hour and we did not talk to a single other person at that table. I met my person and I wanted to know everything about him. And I mean, obviously I didn't tell him that, but we talked about our faith and what churches we were attending and our majors, what we wanted to do with our lives, and everything he said. I was just like, all right, God, like if you picked him for me, like I'm not going to tell you no. And so I remember getting his number because he's a freshman and I was a sophomore at this point. And so I was a grade above him, even though we are the same age. He got held back in kindergarten because he needed glasses and nobody knew that. Sweet baby. So I got his phone number because he was still looking at churches and I had really come to like the one that I was at. And I told him that I could bring him to the church with me next week if he wanted to. And so we exchanged numbers. And when I left the dining hall, I called my mom and I said, hey, Mom, not to freak you out, but I just met my husband. And she paused for about a beat and said, okay. Do you have a picture? And I was like, no, but I think I could find one. And I did. I stalked him on social media and I found a picture and I sent it to her. At the same time, he texted his family group chat. And the lore behind that was his sister, his younger sister, who I adore. She always joked that he was going to marry someone with blonde hair and blue eyes because he had never dated anyone with blonde hair or with blue eyes. And so that was like the running joke, like he was going to marry someone with blonde hair and blue eyes. And so he texted his family group chat that night and said, she has blonde hair and blue eyes. So, and I'm telling you, like, I swear I was not like looking for a husband and he was not looking for a wife. Like he was fairly new to college. He was getting settled. I was perfectly content. So was he. The Lord just brought us together at the perfect time. And God knows what's up. So we ended up hanging out a lot after that, and I was the chaplain for our student government. So for the entire university, I played chaplain. And so whenever they had like student government meetings, I would give a devotional or pray. And, you know, I can never do anything halfway. So I'd write my own devotionals and analogies, and I would stand up in front of the entire student body and present gospel messages. This started a month or so before I met Clayton. And so I invited him to come to this student government night, and I was going to be speaking if he wanted to come. And we had known each other for like 2 weeks at this point, not very long. And it was in nursing school. And so it was super busy. He studied all the time. And he was like, sure, I could take a study break and come see it. He would walk from where he was studying and meet me there and record me, record all of these devotionals. And I asked him to. I had no idea that he was sending them to his entire family. Would have been good to know. Probably good that he didn't tell me, but he was. And he came to every single one. Before we were dating, before we had told each other that we liked each other, he came to every single one. And that was like huge because he was so busy with school, but he took the time to come listen to me forever. Like, we would be in there for an hour. You couldn't just like leave after I finished speaking. Like, you'd have to sit for the whole thing. And it was so sweet and so kind that he did that. And then after it was done, I would drive him back to the library or the study hall or wherever he was at. And that's when we'd have our really great conversations. It was like 10 o'clock at night on a Wednesday night, talking about lives, Jesus, our families. And this went on for months. And we were about 2 months into being friends. And by that point, like, it was pretty clear what we were doing here. At least I made it pretty clear. And I said to him, I was like, look, you already know what I'm doing here. I truly value your friendship, but I just want to make it very clear that, like, I know it's going to be more than that. And I just want to see where you're at with that. Blunt and bold. I don't know that I would recommend that course of action. It worked out great for me, but I don't know. I don't really do things halfway. I'm kind of all in. And so I was like, just letting you know where I'm at. Where are you at? And he looked at me. He was like, you know, Trisha Claire, I can definitely see myself falling in love with you. I said, sweet, let's get on with it. Let's do that then. And we had the best dating experience. I mean, he was just incredible, start to finish. He surprised me during our spring break that year, because we had said that we didn't want to officially start like dating, like being boyfriend and girlfriend until we met each other's families. Because we'd both been in relationships before where family was not overly prioritized. I just didn't want that, especially knowing that this man was going to be my husband. I was like, we need to integrate you into this family situation. And he agreed and thought likewise. And so he surprised me at home. Amazingly, our families only live 45 minutes away from each other, which, again, blessing from the Lord. So we went home to our own families that spring break, and he surprised me by meeting mine and had been secretly texting my mom, who he hadn't met before. And he met my whole family and brought me flowers. And it was like, oh, so we're like doing this. Like, he was officially like very much pursuing me. And he took me on a date, and we overlooked the skyline of our city on this like beautiful mountain at sunset. And I'm a vegetarian. I don't know that I've told you that, but he didn't know what to make for vegetarian. And he got with his mom and he cut PB&Js into heart shapes for our first date. I mean, it's just like the little things where it's like, this man can't truly exist. But he does. And I married him. And greatest decision besides accepting the Lord as my savior, my second greatest decision was marrying my husband, Clayton Williams. So that's just like a snippet of like the start of our story. And we have so many sweet memories and stories like that. But I just wanted to incorporate that part especially into my testimony, because he is just such an important person in my life. Obviously, I married him, but also it's just such evidence of like when the Lord speaks to you and you're obedient, like how he can bless that. And we've truly been so blessed in our relationship and in our marriage, and the Lord has done nothing but show us kindness with each other. So for that, I am eternally grateful. That summer after we met, I finally got to go and be a staffer at Fuge, that church camp that I had grown up going to and was so excited to officially host. And I agreed to go to it before I met Clayton, and that was also a God thing, because the Lord knew I needed to go, but I wouldn't be excited to leave for the whole summer after I just started dating this man, because I was being sent on assignment to go to California. And that is not at all close to where I live. And so I did. I packed up and I left, and I went to California for a whole summer. And I was both a staffer and a missions mobilizer, which basically meant that I worked very closely with the International Mission Board and other mission organizations that sent out missionaries, as well as funded different ministry and mission organizations. I'm very passionate about missions, and so I was super excited to get to do that role and explain what missions looked like to middle schoolers and high schoolers, because that was something that I grew up passionate about, but wishing I had more resources and knowledge on. And so I got to be that person and also spend the summer raising money for these mission organizations. We took up offerings, and all of it went to these mission organizations we partnered with. And it was such a joy and such an honor to get to do that. I also loved getting to teach again. I'd been teaching from like a pulpit style, but really sit in a classroom with middle schoolers. And middle schoolers are so fun because they are trying to figure out who they are. And it's an incredible joy to get to walk with them during that season because, I mean, they got so much going on. Middle school's rough, y'all. They're trying to figure out who they are and what they believe in and who they like. They're starting to like people. And you got to just kind of step into that season with them and show them how the Lord can come alongside them in that. And so it was such a joy to get to spend the summer doing that, interacting with really great other people that I got to do it with. And then I came home and we went back into college. I was now a junior in college, and Clayton and I were now figuring out what our lives were going to look like. He had officially started actual nursing school. So the first 2 years were more like prerequisites, but they're hard. And then the last 2 years is like actual in nursing school where you have clinicals, where you have to go to different local hospitals and kind of intern and shadow people and really get a feel for what you would be doing in the nursing role. And so we began to think about what our lives were going to look like and figure out a timeline for our relationship. And it was such a sweet season. And we had come to the timeline that we wanted to be engaged by my senior year, junior, and be married after he graduated. So engagement for about a year. And so the whole time we were dating, we were just very disciplined on building up this relationship so centered on Christ and preparing us to the very best of our ability to enter into a lifelong covenant with each other. And so our dating experience was very, very, very intentional because we knew what we were to each other very early on. And so we had that privilege. And so I've always said, I mean, if you're going to get a college degree, it's going to take 4 years? And that's for your job. And you're doing all that work and all that education, all that time for an occupation. But you're not going to do anything to prepare for your marriage, which is for sure way more important than your job will ever be. I just feel like that's very backwards. And so, yes, we obviously did school very well and we care about our jobs and worked our butts off. But we also didn't let our relationship suffer on that account either. And so we were very diligent to prioritize each other and spend time with our friends and go on dates. And we took different premarital classes and we read books and we did all the things because it was fun for us. We both love learning. And so learning about something that was so valuable to us, which was each other and our relationship, was a joy to get to do with him. And we're still doing that. We're still love listening to podcasts and reading books and doing online classes and things of that nature together. It's so fun. In the spring of 2023, we've been together for a little over 2 years by then, was when he proposed. And I had no idea that he was going to do that. I knew our timeline, but I just didn't realize it was going to be that early. We had this thing in my sorority. It's called a candlelight, and it's basically your way of announcing your engagement. And it's an in-person thing, and you pass around a candle, and whoever blows out the candle is engaged. And Clayton knew that if we were going to get engaged in college, I would want to do a candlelight thing. We were going into spring break, and it was a 10-day long break. And in my head, I was like, ain't no way he's going to propose on spring break because then I'd have to wait 10 days to tell anybody because I want to have a candlelight. And that's exactly what he did because he's sneaky. And he planned the most beautiful proposal. It was at the same park that he first told me that he loved me, and he had our parents co-conspire and set it up while we were driving home from school. And they wrapped this beautiful tree in string lights, and they hung pictures of us that he had picked out from the tree. And his dad is very handy, and he built us a cross that we got engaged under, and it's a very large cross. And Clayton bought a quilt that we got engaged on because he said that if we got engaged on this quilt that we can take our engagement spot with us wherever we go throughout life. It was just so sweet. And he worked with that same guy from my first day of classes and one of our very best girlfriends that he was in nursing school with, and I just adore, and she's truly one of our very, very best friends. Philip and Macy are their names, and he worked with the both of them to make this engagement happen. And I had no clue it was coming. I thought we were just driving home and he was going to take me out to dinner before we got there. And so we got engaged, and it was beautiful, and I was so surprised, and I jumped around because I was so pumped about it. And we went home to my parents' house, and they had set us up a whole engagement surprise party with all of our friends and family there, and a candlelight dinner, and it was just beautiful. And I'm so grateful for that community that we have. There's a picture of all of us and our friends and our family at that engagement party up on my wall, and I'm looking at it right now, and it's just sweet. I'm very, very grateful for them. And we were married a year and some change after that. In the in-between, after I had graduated, because I graduated a year earlier, I decided that I was going to get my master's degree. And usually that's a 2-year-long program, but not for your girl who's determined. I started my master's degree while I was still in undergrad, and I thought I was going to get it in Christian ministry. So I got my bachelor's degree in Christian ministry and missions, and I had a double minor in both psychology and business management because, again, your girl's a little crazy. And I wanted to diversify my degree, so I had different options of things that I could do. And I thought I was going to get my master's in theology, but I had started working with my parents for their healthcare company. Both of my parents are nurses, and they had started this company for patient advocacy. Was really what it was. Is they, as nurses, had seen so many patients, especially in the geriatric community and chronic care patients as well, that just kind of were thrown to the wayside, that their pain and different struggles was just unnoticed and uncared about by healthcare professionals because they were in between services, in between doctor's appointments, in between hospital visits, in between skilled nursing facility stays or home health visits. And they wanted someone that would be consistently there for those patients, because we did a study that found that if these patients just had someone to educate them, just had someone to care about them, just had someone to check in on them, a vast majority wouldn't be readmitted to the hospital or their diagnosis wouldn't be exacerbated. And so they started this company to bridge that gap, to fill in that lack in healthcare. And I'm a very organized person. And so when they started this company, it blew up fairly quickly. Like it grew so fast that they weren't prepared for the amount of patient intake that they were going to have and how they have such a huge impact on our community. And so they were not organized enough to contain all of this patient data and information. And they asked that I would help them get organized just for a summer. And I did, and I accidentally got good at what I was doing, and I accidentally loved it. And it wasn't just about organization. I fell in love with the mission of what we're doing and how even that in healthcare can be a ministry. And dating someone that was in nursing school, having parents that are nurses, and my sister is a nurse. I had a great understanding and appreciation for the healthcare field. Even as someone that wasn't necessarily in like healthcare, I was very surrounded by it. Especially when Clayton and I would study together all the time and I would quiz him on his test. Like I just was very immersed in the healthcare field, and I could see how we were having such a great impact on lives that truly mattered. And as a Christian company, how meeting the physical need can often lead to meeting a spiritual need. And so my dad was like, you got to keep working here. You accidentally got good at it, and we accidentally really need you to stay. And so I stayed and I worked part-time with them. And so when it was time for me to go back and get my master's, Clayton actually suggested that I, instead of getting a master's in theology, I would get a master's in business with a concentration in healthcare. And so that's what I did. I got a master's in business with a concentration in healthcare, and it took me a year and a half to do it. And then half of that year I was still in my undergrad. So only one full year of just master's itself. So that one year was that one last year that Clayton had in his undergrad as well. So we graduated on the same day at the same time with our various degrees, me with both my bachelor's and now my master's, and him with his bachelor's in nursing. And from there we went out and found us a cute little apartment. We moved back closer to home, and we were married a month later at the cutest little chapel ever. We had the best day. It was so centered on Christ, and we had it wasn't even like a first look because we weren't like dressed in our outfits. It was like a first breakfast, really. We took communion together, and we were both still in our pajamas and had our own private vows, and it was just sweet. It was a great way to like start the day, and the day was very centered on like prayer. And we had his dad marry us. His dad is a pastor, and he did like a gospel presentation after our wedding ceremony for everyone that was there to know that why we were getting married was because of the Lord, and how deeply he loved not only us, but everyone in that room. my dad walked me down the aisle. I dedicated my bouquet that's right here. Actually, this is my wedding bouquet to my mom because I love her so much, and she was so instrumental to not only that day but to both Clayton and I's lives. And his mom is a worship leader and a songwriter, and she's in an incredible band, and hopefully I'll have her on the podcast someday because she is such an inspiration to me. She wrote our first dance song and performed it at our wedding, which was special, and it just was such a great, beautiful day. And then we started our jobs. Clayton passed the NCLEX, which is like a nursing school board exam that you have to be licensed, and he works at a very credible and awesome hospital where we live, and I work for that same healthcare company that I worked for in college, but I'm now the chief of staff and not just an administrative role. And so I get to work with people on a daily basis and really pour into our staff and our patients and the mission of what we're doing and do medical ministry with that. And so that's Clayton and I's plan, is to do medical ministry things together. 6 months into our marriage, I felt like the Lord was putting this exact podcast on my heart to do and to lead. And I have that promise where, like, the Lord calls me to do something, I say yes the first time. And this was the very first thing in my whole life that I was like, are you sure, God? Like, are you sure? Like, I'm really not trying to be disobedient, and I know what you just said to me, but are you sure you want me to do a podcast? Because to be so honest, Lord, what would I even say? What would I even do? Like, I love talking about you. I have no problems doing that. But, like, I don't really do internet stuff. I'm not on social media like that. And I don't know if that makes sense. But, like, I'll do it if you call me to do it. And he just made it very, very, very obvious that he was calling me to it. He would not let me stop thinking about this podcast. And he would wake me up in the middle of the night with ideas for things I could talk about. And he gave me the name Woman at the Well through a walk with my husband. We were just walking around and talking about this thing the Lord put on my heart. And I told him that I felt like the woman at the well and how she was just a girl. She truly was just a girl. Like, she was just living her life and was going to go get some water from a well. And the Lord met her there in the ordinary and in the day-to-day. And he not only met her exactly as she was, exactly who she was, but she was the first person to hear from the mouth of Christ himself that he was the Messiah that they were looking for and had been long awaiting to come. And he let her into that experience and then called her higher, called her past the points of sin that she was living in, and just really lovingly called her into who he was creating and designing her to be. And after sitting at the feet of Jesus, she did the only thing she possibly could have in that situation. The only logical response was to go back into the city and tell everyone she possibly could that the Messiah loves her and was here and wanted to interact with them too. And I told Clayton that I just felt like that girl. Like, I'm just living my life, and the Lord met me exactly where I was and loves me exactly where I am, and now wants me to go and tell everyone of how cool and how awesome and how loving God is. And that's kind of what this podcast is my way of running back into the city and telling everyone about Jesus. And so I said yes to the Lord, and after months of planning and talking about it and writing out ideas, I eventually picked up this microphone and started filming. And it's been such a blessing and an honor to get to do that. And as I've talked to people about it and seen comments and people reach out to me, it's truly such a joy to be a vessel for the Lord. And I have no expectations for what the Lord is going to do, truly. I will keep recording these until God tells me to stop. I'm happy to do it for an audience of one. It was a shock when people that I don't know actually started watching these podcasts, because I'm just a girl that is sitting by the well and wants to tell everyone about Jesus. And I'm sure it was a shock to the Samaritan woman as well when the whole town gave their life to Christ because of her one experience. And so it's just an honor to get to be here with you all, and wherever the Lord leads me next, I just know that it's going to be for my good and his glory. And it's just such a sweet blessing to just get to sit here and yap about how the Lord has truly transformed my life, and what a blessing it is to sit at his feet and be in his presence and get to share that with not only my personal community and family, but with all of you. And so I truly believe in this Woman at the Well family that we've started, and am excited for how the Lord is going to use it and what he's already done. And if nothing was ever else done here, like if nobody ever watched these videos ever again, I would be completely satisfied, because the Lord has been so sweet to even include me in this podcast and in this plan for sharing the goodness and the gospel of Christ. And so for that, I am so, so, so grateful. So on that note, I would love to pray for us as we wrap up today. Lord Jesus, I just want to take this time to thank you so much for the power of a testimony. Lord, as human beings, we know that storytelling is something that allows us to better understand in our own way who you are. There's a reason that in scripture you are constantly telling stories and parables, because there's something about a story that rings so true for us. And so I thank you for the opportunity to get to share my story with the people on the other side of the screen, Lord. I pray that as they go about their day, whatever that looks like, Lord, that you would remind them of the power of their own story, that you are molding and shaping them as a potter is to a clay, into this beautiful divine creation that you've called them to be, and that is for their good and for your glory, Lord. Thank you for how you've used my story to impact not only my life, but any of the lives that are listening. I pray that it is truly an impactful experience, one that allows them to look at you in a new type of awe and desire to grow in their relationship with you, that my story would be one that you use for your kingdom purposes. And Lord, wherever this podcast goes next, it is completely in your hands, and we are just so thankful that we get to be a part of it. We love you, Lord. In your name I pray. Amen. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode with Woman at the Well. Join us next episode when I tell you about how God can speak to us through dreams. Thank you for listening, and remember that Jesus loves you and longs to meet with you. See you next episode when we meet back up at the well. Love you. Bye.